Hey guys, welcome back, it's Ripe again. In today's video, a Karen trespasses on my property repeatedly and when called out pulls a gun on me. She tries to kick me off my own property and then calls the police on me to get me arrested. Here is what happened, let's dive right into the story. So I live 3 doors down from this woman and you can tell she is a Karen from a mile away. The classic short dyed hair, sunglasses, the can I speak to a manager type Karen. Not even able to be original in any single way. One thing she loves doing is going onto everybody's property like she owns the place and starts pointing out problems. Everybody on the block has kicked her off their lawn for at least a dozen times each and I was no exception. In fact, she probably trespassed on my lawn more times than anybody else. She hated me and there was no real reason why. She would comment about my lawn not being green enough and that I need to water it more. She commented on my decorations inside my house after she peeked through the windows. She also complained that in my backyard I had chickens as pets. I know it can vary in different places, but here it's totally legal. She should not be anywhere near my backyard, so it didn't need to be any of her business. You might ask, if she is really a serial trespasser, why have the cops not been called about this woman? Well, they have. In fact, twice the calls came from me to get her to leave my property. They just don't see her as a threat and ask her to just get off the property, which works for about 3 days before she is at it again. Calling them felt like a total waste of time, especially because she would leave if you asked enough times. One time things were a little bit different and something in Karen must have just snapped. I found her looming right near my windows and went to just start the whole song and dance as usual. Me, Karen, you need to get off my property. You know that you're trespassing when you do this. Karen, I'm getting sick and tired of you thinking you can tell me what to do. I have freedom, you know. Me, not on private property. I know the police have told you all of this. She pulled out a gun on me and I honestly thought it was a toy. Karen, I bet you have nothing to say now, do you? I bet you didn't know that here I am allowed to defend my property. Me, except for the fact that this is my property and I'm telling you to leave it. She points the gun in the air and shoots, which is when I realized that she had a real gun and was going full Karen trying to steal my property. She went on a proper rant about how she would leave before to be nice, but she wasn't going to do it any longer. That the property was hers and this time you're the one getting kicked out by the police. So she called the cops on me while holding me at gunpoint in my own yard. I was trying to get some distance and moving towards the backyard a little bit, which has a fence. She wanted to stay close and with all the moving around, we ended up with her back near that fence and me in front of her. I was trying to calm down the situation because I really did not see her as much of a threat even with a gun. I told her that if she tried to shoot me, she would just end up in jail and to go home instead. I guess she wanted to prove that she could be serious and shot the ground near my feet. Unlike in the air, she had a bunch of recoil from the shot that I don't think she was expecting. She backed up into the fence and started screaming, not because of the gunshot or me hurting her. It was due to my chickens. I actually have my fence lined with chicken wire and it can be hard to tell. Falling back into that stuff is not fun and she was getting cut up and bleeding. I will give her props that she never dropped the gun the entire time. When the police arrived, she was screaming that I attacked her and broke into her property. This town is not huge and with all the calls to the police, a couple of them recognized Karen and knew damn well that this was not her house. The bigger issue is that she didn't want to drop the gun when told to, screaming that she had the right to a gun and they had to tase her in order to get her to drop it. She was arrested on a ton of charges for having the gun, not listening to police, holding me at gunpoint, etc. It only got worse once she went down to the station and they did some testing on her. Not only was she drunk, but she had some pretty serious drugs in her system. That might explain why she was acting so differently, but still like her entitled Karen self at the same time. If that makes sense to anybody else. I was also pressing charges for trespassing on my property, which was finally gonna stick. With all of those things stacked against her, she would have to be an idiot not to take some kind of deal and wanna go to trial. Well, she was that much of an idiot because a few months later, I found myself being sworn in to testify about what happened that day. She was trying to use some story of how the land and house belonged to her, and I came in one day and stole it. Filled it with violent chickens to try and keep her out while I looted the place and squatted. Not seeming to care that I had a mortgage for that house and bills being paid in my name. Wanting to use her owning the house as a reason for having the gun as well. Hell, she even tried to press assault charges on me because she got cut in the fence, but nobody was willing to take on that losing case for her. She did not need to go to civil court with me because she did not damage anything, so I did not need to get money from her. Later, some people told me I should have taken her to civil court too for emotional damages, but oh well. Anyway, she was screwed enough anyway with a phony story, an illegal gun, and drugs in her system. Without taking a plea deal, it meant that she was getting a harsh sentence and going to prison for a very long time for what she did. Being found guilty of every single charge placed against her, for me, I think the hardest part of the trial was not trying to laugh when she wanted to act all tough and intimidating again. It just never worked, and she had it in her mind that she could come off as that without it being comical. I'm glad that I could hold my tongue and not get in trouble for laughing during the trial and getting myself in trouble. With Karen gone, the block is pretty quiet now, and we are all pleased for that fact. I still have not broken the habit of looking around when I open my door, kind of expecting her to be there one day, just trespassing again. And yeah, ripe stars, I'm happy to hear that Karen is gone for good. I hope she will never terrorize that neighborhood again. But then again, I'm not really positive that even a long stay in prison will change a Karen. But then again, you can always hope. Either way, the next one is a petty revenge story. My name is John. I worked in a pizza shop back when I was in college. I worked with Sarah, a vindictive lady who would stir up a lot of drama. Sarah would pick a target and then bully them into quitting. Where I am at, college students can receive welfare if their parents earn less than a certain threshold. I was ineligible for student support due to my parents' income, even though they did not support me, and I desperately needed this job. Matthew, a new hire, quit after Sarah's harassment. Sarah's attention then turned to me. Sarah would approach my supervisor and spout BS like, "Hey Mr. Supervisor, I asked John where the snake is and he said the snake is cutting pizzas." This while the supervisor was actually cutting the pizzas. She would shout at me with extreme hostility. She would not warn me if pans were hot, a major sin in kitchen jobs. She conspired with her friends to accuse me of slacking off even though they had never complained about me until Matt quit. And well, this all took a toll on me. My hours were cut, impacting both my financial and mental well-being. I even considered dropping out of college because I was struggling to afford rent. Sarah, on the other hand, was illegally claiming student welfare despite being employed by the pizza shop. You can only claim the welfare if you are unemployed. Sarah, in the first year of her law degree, was also aspiring to become a lawyer. The thing about being a lawyer is that you need to be admitted to the bar to begin practicing. The law industry is very strict. Even proven allegations of plagiarism in college would make one permanently ineligible to become a lawyer. And frankly, she was stupid for defrauding the government. There is an anonymous complaints line for welfare fraud. Most of the time, the welfare department never follows up. Occasionally, however, they would send officials to investigate. And well, this was one of those few times they followed up. I sent an anonymous tip stating the business, her schedule, her name, and her number. I was on shift when some officials from the welfare department came in, informing us that multiple complaints were made against Sarah. I think my boss could have just told them to scram since they probably didn't have a warrant, but instead of doing that, he licked their shoes, showing them all of the CCTV footage. The officials then questioned Sarah. She of course panicked, confessing to everything. I felt no sympathy for her. As a law student, she should have known to remain silent. Long story short, Sarah received a suspended sentence which would most certainly disqualify her from becoming a lawyer. She dropped out of college while I continued working at the pizza shop and eventually graduated with an associate's degree. I have an alright job now. And yeah, ripe stars, I would say, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Anyway, the next one is another revenge story. And please let me know in the comments, which kind of stories do you prefer? Malicious compliance, petty revenge, or entitled people? I'm very curious about what you have to say. The next one starts like this. I recently took a flight from Germany to Macedonia. Not even leaving the gate, I felt my seat shaking. Turning around, I saw a man grabbing the back of my seat. He saw me, removed his hand, and I thought that was that. But no, he repeated this act multiple times within the next 10 minutes. Each time, I would lean back trying to press against his hand, making him retract it. After the plane took off, the shaking resumed. I looked back again, but this time he was only grabbing the very top out of my head's reach. speech. I dramatically turn around looking back from the aisle. He's just looking and talking to a woman 3 rows back, which is presumably his partner. They had likely opted for the cheaper random seat selection, hence the distance. When our eyes met, he pulled his hand away. By this point, he had done this at least 20 times and I was getting irritated to say the least. The next time I felt the shaking, pretending to stretch, I wet my fingers with a generous lick, near spit on them, grabbed the back of my seat and just doused his hand. Needless to say, he did not touch my seat for the remainder of the flight. Was I wrong? Didn't know how to get the point across not to keep shaking my seat after many failed attempts. And yeah, ripe stars, that is honestly one of the things I never understand on flights. There's always these people that push into your seat in such a weird way. I don't know why they do that. Also, in my opinion, an extension of this is when you're in the seat and you lean back as far as possible. And yes, I know you have the right to do that because you have that seat. However, in my opinion, it's definitely not polite and I would never do that. Okay, sure, leaning back a little bit is okay, but all the way, it can clearly inconvenience others and is just not polite. Anyway, the next one is an Am I the A-hole story. So my male 45 son Cole is a freshman college athlete, getting a jump on training. Apparently there's a British college rowing team that puts out a beefcake nude calendar of their team as a fundraiser. And by the way, ripe stars, just a warning I forgot to say, this story might be slightly offensive for some people, but I think it's just a funny story. Anyway, apparently it has become quite a thing, relatively famous. I guess the boys got together and decided to do the same thing, high quality printing and absolutely A+ photography and coming up with a really slick product. It is selling well on campus and at this point it's gonna be on pretty much every girl's dorm wall. And some guys' wall as well. They have made decent money to help fund the team, but most was donated to a children's cancer charity. Pretty amazing. We did not know anything about this until Cole came home and proudly presented us with a copy. His month is May, it did not go well. His mom almost had a stroke, wailing, hyperventilating and weeping. Apparently she is too mortified for words to comprehend that a bunch of college girls are gonna have a picture of her baby in the buff on their walls for 1 month. And what will her friends think? I think it's ridiculous. A calendar of naked guys is nothing to get worked up over. They are all technically adults and I'm proud of the boys' ingenuity and confidence. I'm sure it took some balls to do that, figuratively, not only literally, and to give the money to charity is just amazing. I told my wife that she should lighten up, that if I looked as good as he did at that age, had been as handsome and tan and fit, I would have done it too. The calendar is not X-rated and it's not PORN. Okay, it's pretty damn racy and definitely pushing the limit, but no one's business is really exposed thanks to judicious poses and props and such, although they are definitely pushing that exposure to the absolute maximum. I have to admit, if anything was shifted the tiniest bit, you would be able to tell the boys' religion, so to speak, but they kept it all legal enough and they obviously wanted to sell. Fine, who cares, but his mom though is insisting that I do something about it. What am I supposed to do? What's done is done. Stop them. You cannot stop what has already finished. Get them back. Seriously? You know that's impossible, right? Punish him. For what? How? Cue more hysterics. And now she is not even speaking with me for not supporting her, and ashamed to show her face to her friends who I'm sure could not care less about some college boy's pictures from 600 miles away. And for what it's worth, Cole's girlfriend is totally on board with it. My wife called me an a-hole, but not in those words, but not taking her side. So Reddit, am I the a-hole? Perhaps I'm the a-hole for not seeing things from my wife's point of view and not sympathizing with her. But honestly, I don't think I am. Judgment facts, I might be the a-hole because number 1, I did not take into account my wife's distress and was dismissive of her, and number 2, as a good husband I should be more attuned to her feelings. And here, ripe stars, let me know what you think about this in the comments. I would say OP is not really the a-hole here because, as he said, the son is an adult and he can pretty much do whatever he wants. I would say it's more important to be supportive of your kid, and it's not like he's completely ignoring his wife. But anyway, let me know what you think about this in the comments. Reddit said, you are not the a-hole, your adult son is not the a-hole, your son's supportive girlfriend is also not the a-hole. Unfortunately, even after your wife removes the stick up her rear, she will still be an a-hole for the ridiculous over-the-top histrionics. It's fine to be uncomfortable with what your adult son did. The wailing, sobbing, and the dramatics, though, are counterproductive and annoying. Comment number 2, not the a-hole, that's pretty hilarious. No mom wants to think of their son as a sexual being, but he is an adult, he is covering his private bits, and well, what's done is done. Your wife's reaction is over the top. Wailing, hyperventilating, seems like she has not realized that her baby boy is an adult now. She may be even more mortified to know her friends would love to get their hands on that calendar. Comment number 3, not the a-hole, show her that firefighters and other professionals in noble fields of work also participate in this kind of thing for charities. Her reaction seems way over the top and she seems to be far too concerned about what others think of her. Although, to be fair, her reaction would probably be considered as way more acceptable if this was her daughter rather than her son. There's probably a huge double standard here. And the next one is titled, The Nicest House. The year was 1995. My grandpa was always one of those coy men that knew how to make his way to the top of any situation, sometimes regardless to the cost to others. But while shady, he was for the most part a decent human. This story is not about his shady side though, it's about how he was able to build the tallest house in town, even though it was against building code for the county. A general contractor bought a property in this small town and just started building without getting the proper permits for the house. The house was already framed and starting to get sheeted and had the roof built when the building inspector was called to the property. Of course, he shut the construction down, the contractor was missing permits and the house was too tall for what the code allowed. So the job was red-tagged and shut down. Well, the general contractor couldn't afford to tear down the house and rebuild, so he just walked away. My grandpa heard about this and went to talk to the bank to see if he could buy the property. He offered them $250K for it, but the bank denied his offer and said it was gonna be auctioned off instead. He decided he was gonna show up for auction. Day of the auction, the only other person who showed up is another contractor from town who my grandpa knew. He talks to him and basically lays it out like, I really want this property, and if you will just walk away from this one, I will make you a partner in the next property I buy. And in a small town like that, my grandpa swears a gentleman's promise and the other contractor walks away from the auction. They start the bid at $200K and my grandpa offers them $100K. The bank ended up selling for way less than my grandpa originally offered. So then he owns the lot and instead of demolishing the house that is half built on it, like the county inspector wanted, he just decided to bring all the mistakes to code, keep everything revealed for the inspector, and continued to build on the house. The county inspector hears that instead of being torn down, my grandpa is continuing to build on the house and drives out there immediately. When he confronts my grandpa shows him that he has brought everything to code. The inspector then tells him that the house is still too tall for what the code allows and needs to be demolished to a legal height. My grandpa simply replied, well, that's easy, I will just import in some dirt to put around the first floor of the house. The inspector became frustrated and left him to build. My grandpa was smart like that, but then the whole reason I know this story is because my grandpa let my family move in with him after his house was built, and while my dad was paying grandpa rent for us to be there, grandpa drained the equity out of the house, did not pay the mortgage, and bailed to leave us homeless once the house was foreclosed. So it's like I said, he was a very clever man, but a little bit shady also. And wow, ripe stars, I gotta say, that story took a very unexpected turn. Let me know what you think in the comments about this grandpa. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. Insane HOA banned children from playing outside. We sued them for $461,000. If you have ever dealt with an HOA, you know just how horrible they can be. Not only that, but the board of directors and/or your local HOA president might be a snobby individual who thinks they hold all the power in the neighborhood. As a matter of fact, my experience with our neighborhood HOA was so terrible that my wife and I moved out of our beloved house. Although our new house has been paid off by the money we won in a lawsuit. Let me give you a little backstory first. The neighborhood that we lived in was big and spacious, but unfortunately it was part of an HOA. The neighborhood had several grassy areas and small playgrounds for the children. When we first moved into the neighborhood, my daughters were too young to play in these areas and actually enjoy it without adult supervision. However, as time went on, they became more excited to go outside and play. My eldest daughter was 7 and her younger sister was 5. And while I know some of you might scold me for letting them play outside alone, we lived in one of the safest cities in the area and our neighborhood was in a gated community. Anyways, back to the story. So as my daughters got older, they really enjoyed playing outside. Not only on the little playgrounds, but also loved playing the common grass areas with each other. I was simply happy that children of this generation actually enjoyed being outside and let their imaginations run wild. However, the HOA quickly ruined their fun. If you did not like HOAs before, you are sure to hate them after hearing this. And if you have never dealt with an HOA before, well, after this, you will never want to. The first occurrence was when my family and I were on a walk enjoying the sunny summer day. My wife and I decided to take the girls and dogs for a lazy stroll, but along the walking path in the neighborhood there were several grassy common areas. Of course, along our walk, our daughters would run off to the side and play in the mini fields or chase each other around. And like I said previously, I was only glad that my children actually liked being outside. It just so happened that we were walking past the HOA president's house and he was collecting mail. One of the common areas was directly across his house, so he could see my daughters running around in the area. He had come over and warned us that these grassy areas were not meant to be played on. This immediately put me off. Who sees a kid playing and having fun and then decides to try and stop it? Besides that, it was not even like they were super noisy or doing anything that would get them in trouble, they were just kids having innocent fun. I kindly let him know that they were not really playing in the common area, they were just running off and chasing each other, being kids while we took them for a walk. He said that I should watch my kids before I get a fine. Again, this put me off even more. I let him politely know that there were no official rules in place that prevented anyone, even kids, from enjoying the grassy common areas. As a matter of fact, a select few of these areas had small grills and a few picnic tables, so it was almost inviting us and the kids to enjoy the areas. Regardless, we went on our way and tried to ignore the HOA president, except that about a week later we had received a letter in the mail from the HOA board. In the letter it was a warning about our kids playing in the common areas again. In the letter we were told that this was our final warning and if the kids were caught playing in the areas again, we would be fined and have playground/common area privileges revoked. Huh? So the kids could not play in the common area or the playgrounds. I had showed the letter to one of my neighbors and she had gotten a similar letter. Another neighbor had actually been fined because they were using the grills and their kids were running around the grass area unsupervised. I was not going to tell my kids to stop being kids or to enjoy what the neighborhood had to offer. Unfortunately for me, this led to several more letters in the mailbox and several threatening fines against me. The last letter that I got had stated that if I did not pay the fines within 2 weeks, they would double what I owed them. I was not entirely too sure that this was legal. However, I was not going to wait to find out. I decided to get an attorney and lawyer involved, and although I did not expect that much out of winning the case, boy was I happy I did take legal action. The attorney helped me file a class action lawsuit since other neighbors in the neighborhood had also been affected and received these letters. We ended up winning the case and the HOA had to pay those affected up to $461,000 in total. And although I was glad justice was being served, I just did not want to be in that neighborhood anymore. There were talks of the HOA disbanding and the HOA president stepped down, although he still lived in the neighborhood. So, with our lawsuit money, my wife and I ended finding another beautiful neighborhood to move to. Between the revenue from selling our house and the money from the lawsuit, we were able to put a hefty down payment on a house with a big yard so that my kids could run around freely. Oh, and by the way, there is no HOA. Disrespect the court? Pay $10,000 per month in child support. This is a story about my mother and the a-hole who donated genetic material for my brother and me. They broke up before my younger brother was born and my mother had to take him to court when he refused to pay child support. He asked for paternity tests, continuations and delays to the proceedings. There was no doubt about paternity. This a-hole's strategy was that for each month of delay before child support was ordered, he would owe less money. Court orders would not be backdated. The child support suit had already been in process while my mother was pregnant, seeking support for me, which led to my mother standing in family court 3 days after giving birth to my brother, alternately waiting through other people's court appearances and going out to the hall to nurse her brand new son. Our father did not show up and his lawyer requested a continuance, another court date sometime in the future, probably a month or 2 out. My mother said, "I would rather not have a continuance, Your Honor." And the judge said, "Well, we will have to get a continuance anyway in order to correct this paperwork. The brother's name's birth date is incorrect. This date would mean that he's 3 days old." Mother, "No, that is accurate." Judge, "What?" Knowing that it is hard for a nursing baby that young to be away from its food source. "Where is he?" Mother, "Out in the hall with his grandmother." According to her, my brother's crying could be overheard even inside the courtroom. Judge, taking a second to gather her thoughts, "Let me get this straight. You gave birth 3 days ago and showed up, and he couldn't make it to court for no specific reason? He also failed to submit income statements." The lawyer tried to make an excuse, but there really wasn't a good reason. My father was just being an a-hole. Judge, "Okay, what do you estimate his income to be?" Mother, "I know he earns $6,000 per month normally. I also believe that he acted as a real estate agent in the sale of a home that will get him $50,000 in commission." Judge, "In that case, I'm ordering that he shall pay $10,000 per month in child support until such time that he shows up in court with income statements that support a different decision." My father called my mother to reach a settlement for child support within the hour. He also showed up punctually to every subsequent court date, dealing with custody and the other complications of reproducing with an a-hole. He was forced to pay that first month's $10,000 following the judge's orders though. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.